Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Future Barrister podcast. Tonight we have a very special guest, Karolina Zielinska. Did I say that correct?
You did, yes, thank you.
And she is a future pupil barrister, and she secured pupillage right out of bar school. And I thought that would be a very interesting conversation for us to have, and should be so helpful to so many of you, my listeners. So I will allow her to give a little bit about her background and what motivated her to the bar thus far.
Of course. So in terms of my personal background, my family is Polish. They moved to the UK post sort of World War II. I grew up going to grammar school. I got my law degree at the University of Cambridge, and then I completed the ICCA bar course last year, finishing this August, which I have passed. I have recently been informed, so this is good. I applied for pupillage in the 2020-2021 cycle, and yes, as we've heard, I was successful, which I'm very, very grateful for. And hopefully I can give a bit of detail as to what I did when I was applying.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll just get right into the law. So at what point, what's the earliest point that you can remember being interested in the law?
I have always been a huge reader, which I think is a common amongst many aspiring barristers, and I have always loved reading. I used to read a lot of John Grisham type novels when I was really young, and it's always a bit embarrassing to admit because they always say, oh, don't tell people that you like legal dramas like Suits or things like that, because it's seen as not the reality, which I'm sure is true, but it definitely got me thinking about law in the first place. And a really important moment for me was when I was about 11. I met a friend of my mother's. They'd met backpacking when she was really, really young. And this person had gone on to become a really successful barrister in international law who lived in Australia. She's now on the Supreme Court of Australia, which is insane. But, yeah, they were just distant friends. And so she happened to be in the UK that week. I ended up hearing about her career from my mother. And I thought, ooh, that sounds like an interesting profession that goes with what I like, reading and having lots of arguments. So I started working towards that goal, really, from that point onwards.
That's amazing, Karolina.
She was a remarkable woman, but I don't think she realizes the effect that that conversation had on me, because we literally just talked once at that time when I was 11. After that point, I think it was really just, it sparked this idea in my head. And yeah, over the years, I never found anything I like doing more.
I think that's all it takes, isn't it? You know, just that exposure, knowing somebody else in the profession. And that's one of the conversations that I would like to take place more. You know, we have such an ongoing conversation about diversity and inclusion. And as much as there's so many programs, wonderful programs that are taking place right now, I think there's nothing that trumps knowing somebody else in the profession, that one-to-one, because imagine at 11, having that kind of influence on you.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it really made a difference to hear somebody talking passionately about a career that they liked. And even though I suppose the extent of their friendship wasn't such that I could kind of ask for career advice, if you see what I'm saying, but it definitely planted that seed. And I think it is really important that we have a wider understanding of the profession at an earlier age, because it's definitely not something I would have considered otherwise, or at least not until much, much later on in my life. And sometimes planning for a career in the same way that you might plan to be a vet from when you're 5, you know, that can be quite important as well.
That's amazing. I love to hear that, actually. Yeah. So from that point, did you decide barrister route, or did you just want to be a lawyer?
I was always on the barrister track. I think part of it was ego, because I liked the idea of being able to talk and people had to listen to me. But it also seemed, and I'll be a bit frank here, just slightly more interesting because of the variety of work available, the independent side to it. I have always been really, really independent. I definitely wouldn't like to work in an office type environment for the rest of my life in that classic employment pupillage. So yes, there were a lot of tick boxes there for me, really.
Amazing. I'm just going to keep going through my little question template here as well. So let's just, head right into pupillage,
Sure.
You started law school. At what point did you know that there was something called pupillage? Like, was it before law school because of that early interest? And how did you research into the area of what you'd need to, get there?
I think when I was in my first year of university, I remember doing a little bit of Googling about what I would need once I graduated, what would be a good way to prepare myself for a career as a barrister. And I think at that point, what is most clear from most careers and maps and things like that, you can find online, and they'll tell you, try and do some mini pupillages. Try and get involved in your university law society, try and do some mooting if your university has that as an opportunity. And so that's what I focused on whilst I was at university, really. And I think it's always important to hear people's failures as well as their successes. And I personally found it really, really hard to get many pupillages, particularly even in my second and third years of university. It was really, really difficult. They're so competitive these days. And I think part of that is because of the volume of people applying, and that it's very difficult to pick people amongst applicants. Part of it was because I didn't understand really what I was applying for and the profession itself, and so I don't think I was wording my forms very well, which I'm sure is an issue probably a lot of people have at that very first stage.
Yeah,
Trying to get work experience. So that's what I focused on in my first year. In my second year, I was still trying to get many pupillages, but I think by that point I'd realized you can have a more diverse experience. There is no one size fits all kind of experience you need to have at the bar. And so I started looking a bit further afield. I did some court-based volunteering for a charity. I did some marshalling. And so I think in a way, all of that ticked the same mini pupillage box that I was struggling to do in the traditional way. But yeah, by the time I was in my third year, I was starting to get quite nervous about pupillage because grades-wise, I didn't think I was there yet to be in with a chance of actually getting pupillage. So I decided to wait a year or two before applying, focus on my academic side of things and getting more practical advocacy experience. And then I properly researched it once I'd graduated from university.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that you had problems getting a mini pupillage because, you don't expect somebody who is attending, Cambridge to say, well, I struggled to get a mini pupillage. I attended BPP and I struggled as well to get my first mini pupillage. I think, like you said, the competition is so fierce that persons who already have some on their CVs are easily picked. And so I think my first mini pupillage was because I had a friend who was a solicitor. And because of a connection, I got my first mini pupillage. And after that, they did come easier. I think, like you said, because you now understand what you need to put on those cover letters as well. So that's a really, really good point. That first mini is very difficult.
But after that, it gets a bit easier. Yes, I managed to do one in my, was it my second or third year of university? But after that, the other two that I did were during the pandemic after I had graduated. Right. So whilst I was at bar school. And I think those were slightly easier to get in some ways because when things moved online, as they had to, there were more places available. So I think that was definitely part of it. But by then I did also have a much clearer idea of what I wanted to do. And so maybe that helped my applications a bit more.
Awesome. So I think one of the takeaways from just this small part of the conversation is that, mini pupillages are more intense than we think because everybody's like, okay, just get a mini pupillage, you just shadow a barrister. But because of the fierceness of the competition, you do have to look at how you tailor your cover letters. And really ensure that you're targeting the barristers' chambers that you're applying to, the areas, the expertise, and really tailoring that cover letter to secure that mini pupillage. Mini pupillages now have become so competitive.
No, absolutely. It is a bigger barrier than people think to gain one of those. But there are lots of schemes now that offer mini pupillages. There's the Bridging the Bar scheme. Yes. Which is a great way into finding work experience. Similarly, I didn't make the most of this opportunity, but certainly other people could. The inn of court that you join will have an option for you to get a marshalling placement,
Yes,
or even potentially a mini pupillage via the inn. So that's worth checking out as well.
Yeah, definitely. I did get to do both of my marshalling through my inn, and I met amazing judges. Like I had the opportunity to marshal the first Asian High Court judge. So it's like totally interesting. So I would encourage every single person to try to get marshalling through your inn. I think one of the problems is that persons wait until after the scholarship rounds to join the inns. But you need to have that experience before you can.
This is why I didn't do it myself. But there are other alternatives on the marshalling point. You can just write to courts, which I did, to say, can we spend a week here? I'll be honest, most of them said no to me, because often it's a regional thing. You have to pick courts near you.
Yes.
And sometimes they do take marshals, sometimes they don't. But I was at Wood Green, so try them in North London if you're struggling.
I actually did that as well, but I got rejections all the way.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
Yeah, I did try to do that through the courts that were in my area at the time, but they said no. Yeah.
Do you know what, Neve, though? Part of it is that is also competitive. And I know it hurts to say it because it seems like every facet of this career is just horribly competitive. Yeah. But I know somebody who did have success writing directly to courts for a marshalling placement, but they wrote a handwritten letter, which I think was maybe a bit more persuasive. Yeah, this is the extent we have to go to now.
So the person reading it must have gone like, no, we absolutely have to get her in.
Yeah, see, that's an option if you really need a marshalling placement. But there are definitely other court-based alternatives which chambers will happily take as experience. You can. I looked into this once as a possibility. You can become I've forgotten the word now for it on the spot. When you're a magistrate. God, how did I forget that?
That's all right.
No, you can apply to become a magistrate, and you do have to sit a certain number of court days a year, but it really isn't that onerous, and they need young people in that profession. So you can do that all the way through bar school, up and all the way through law school, bar school. That's an option. You can do court-based volunteering, as I was doing. I was collecting information for a survey, but I'm sure there'll be other similar
schemes that are available. Yeah. Absolutely.
Spending time in courts. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's all good.
There's another one, I think it's called PSU, where you go in to assist litigants in person, and I may be getting that wrong. I may be linking the name to the description incorrectly, but you go in to assist litigants in person, just showing them how the court runs, where to sit, etc. And that's really good experience as well. And for some of the persons who are looking at us who might not even know what marshalling is, you could look at our other videos or our other podcasts where I explain. I have one on mooting, one on marshalling coming up really soon. But just because we spent such an extensive amount of time discussing it, marshalling is where you get to shadow a judge for 3 days. You get to sit with them, sit on cases. It's a really good experience because you get to see how a court develops the court, how it works its way, how the judge handles the jury, if that's the sort of case that you get to see. And so that's really, really helpful and highly encouraged. I mean, it cannot be said enough how much of an experience that is. I think we'll move on to our second part of our session, which is about financial assistance. And just basically talking us through what kind of funding did you have for the bar course? Was it self-financed or was it scholarships?
So I think it's really important to always be candid about finances. So I will be very open about this because I don't see the point in hiding it. Why? So my background is that I'm from a single parent family. My brother was also at university at the time. I was looking to do the bar course. So my mum was trying to help out financially, but obviously there was a fair amount of strain there. And I did receive a bursary whilst I was at university, so I had tried to save up some money from that alongside my usual sort of student loan, etc.
Right.
So going into sort of scholarship applications, that was where my funding was coming from. And I was hoping very much to get a scholarship from one of the inns, because otherwise I would have definitely had to take a year out and save up. And then if I still hadn't got a scholarship applying a second year, I probably would have had a long loan discussion with my family. But I wouldn't have been the first, because I have heard people whose parents have remortgaged houses to fund the bar course.
Right.
Very, very difficult to afford. And so with that being said, that was my plan B. It's always important to have a plan B.
Yeah.
Always ask about this at scholarship interviews. They want to make sure that you're being realistic about how you're going to get there, just in case they don't give you a scholarship. So I was successful in getting a scholarship from Middle Temple. They gave me about £9,000, which is a not inconsiderable sum. I'm very grateful. On top of that, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship from my college at university. They had a fund for people who were going on to do graduate legal studies. Luckily, and it really did just come down to luck, no one else in my year needed any graduate legal finance. So I got the entire fund. And all in all, yeah, I was really lucky. It would have been a lot harder, I think, for both myself and my parents to fund this year without that, because that was an additional £5,000. So that covered the cost of the bar course itself, which is a bit depressing. Wiped out the whole amount. But that was covered. I also managed to sort of wipe out my savings.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it was necessary. I mean, I think what helped was when making the scholarship application, they really do force you to plan out a budget for the bar course year, and that assisted me because I had savings, and with some contributions from my mother, those scholarships, I was able to make it work. And I did get a job pretty much immediately after I finished my bar course. I finished my exams on a Thursday. I started on the Monday.
Oh my goodness, no break.
It really was immediately, but I think that helped with the finances as well. But certainly there are a lot of options, but scholarships are unfortunately the major way that the course seems to be funded at the moment. I did pick the cheapest course on the market at the time, which was the ICCA course. It was a good course aside from the finances, but it was cheap, and that definitely was
okay. And how would you say you found out about the scholarships? Did you know from the time you started is it the GDL that you did, or LLB?
I did an LLB law.
So from the time you started the LLB, did you know that you'd be applying for an in scholarship for the bar course?
I was always planning on applying for a scholarship, just because there was really no other way I could have funded it without a very expensive private loan or substantial parental help. But not everyone has that. So yeah, a scholarship was definitely a necessity. I found out about it online. I must say the thing I found most difficult was not necessarily researching the scholarship itself, but researching the inns, because it was very hard to understand the differences between them as an outsider to the bar as a career. And when you don't know anyone who's there, there's no one you can ask about what they're like. I chose Middle in the end, predominantly because they guaranteed you an interview.
Right.
And I was very nervous, because the scholarship was very much my hope for funding the bar, that if I didn't even get an interview, I wouldn't have a chance. So I wanted that guaranteed. And they also gave out very decently sized awards, so that was another factor. But everyone has their own reasons.
Yeah, I think when you research online, everybody just keeps saying they're all the same, but it's not very helpful, is it? But I think one of the things that helped me was that a lot of persons have said, because Gray's Inn is quite small, the scholarships are more chunky. So that was one of the things that really drove me to apply to Gray's. And at that point, I'd already been with them for a while because I just liked it. I'd been to a few events there. And I like the environment. I feel like they would have supported me. So I joined Gray's Inn. So my course was fully funded by the Inn, like the complete course, with even a little bit extra to to help the debts that I had at that time, because they ask you. And for persons who may be listening as well, one of the other things is that there's two of the Inns who give residential scholarships. That's Gray's Inn, and I don't know which other one. Is it Lincoln's?
It might be. I'm not sure. I mean, the residential scholarships are very much available if you need them, though, and I have friends who benefited from them.
Exactly. Yeah. So you get living accommodations. So for some people, that's a massive thing. I did apply. I was not successful, but in hindsight, that would not have worked out because I was married, and so because it's shared living spaces. But for somebody who's single or able to make that separation for that time, I mean, to have a flat right in the heart of London paid for, that's an amazing thing. So definitely consider that when you're applying to your inn for a scholarship.
Absolutely. And, you know, everyone will have their own reasons for prioritizing the amount of the scholarship or even the guaranteed interview. But it's important to know that, you know, I feel like it's just important to say I was successful in getting a scholarship, and I really, really was unsure that I would be at the time, having not done a mini pupillage, having only done one marshalling placement and like a week with the solicitors as work experience when I was 16. I had gotten fairly low marks in my second year at university, and I was having a tough year, but I was very worried that would impact on my chances of getting a scholarship. But it did work out, and I think for me that straight to interview system benefited me for sure. Because I'm not sure if I'd gone for academics, I might have struggled.
I think given those factors, then you should definitely go with somebody who's guaranteed you an interview, because you might not have made it through the paper sieve. So you really have to look at the pros and the cons. That's interesting. I remember leaving my my interview, and I called my husband, who was my fiance at the time. And I said, "Oh, I didn't get it. I'm so sorry. I know you're supposed to be positive, but I don't know, this was not good." And I've heard so many people say that they just feel that they do such a horrible job. I think it's because the expectation is just so unbelievably high. But
I remember my interview felt like it went really badly. To start, it felt quite rushed, but I understand in hindsight that's something that it's very necessary, because if you're going to interview everyone, you're not going to have that much time for everybody. So it's got to be very quick. So I did get the impression that once they could tell I'd answered a question or that I knew the answer, they'd just move on to the next one.
Right.
But because of that speed as well, it did feel like more of an, this is going to sound really bad, I promise they were very lovely, but more of an attack than the usual interview, because they had to immediately get to the issues with your application rather than skirting around them a bit first. And so I got asked straight up about my worst grade. I got asked straight away about what I planned to do if I didn't get a scholarship. I got asked as well a very specific question, which did throw me off quite a bit, hence why I thought I hadn't done so well. I got asked about a recent case note that I had read, which just surprised me, because personally, I'll read journal articles, I'll read judgments, but I very rarely read case notes. And I hadn't read one for quite a while before that question. So I just had to think of something on the spot. And I started talking about an employment law case that I had read recently, but I was very conscious of the fact that one member of the panel was an employment law barrister. So if I made any mistakes, because it was such a big case, they'd know. And it was okay in the end. I did get thrown off a little bit when they said who gave the leading judgment in the case, because I just couldn't remember. But, you know, clearly none of this mattered in the end, because it did work out. So I think even if it feels like it's not going that well, or the questions surprise you, as long as you can stay calm and still give a decent stab at it, that's what we're looking for, maybe.
I don't think you're meant to be a barrister. I think that's why we get so hard on ourselves. I think they're more looking at how quickly can you respond, and if you don't know the answer, can you just honestly say, you know what? Well, I haven't read a case note in a while, but a recent development that I've been reading on is this, and I found that interesting because So it's about just being able to have a conversation. I think this is what they're more looking for. I remember one of the topical questions that I was asked was about diversity at the bar, and specifically, Black and minor ethnic, background applicants. And of course, I'm Black, and all three of the panelists were white. And so you have this person from a small island, no matter how much confidence you have, there is a little bit of intimidation of, okay, how do I answer this question?
No, of course, I don't blame you. That's a awkward situation to have to answer that.
And I know Grace in there's quite a lot about diversity, so it could have just been that they didn't have enough ethnic minorities to fill every room, and so I just happened not to have somebody in my room. That was a little bit.
It's interesting that you got asked that though, because I personally, when I was making pupillage applications, one of the things I did when I was looking at chambers was I would just have a quick scroll through the whole list of photos of people who work there. And I know this sounds bad, but it is because some chambers are hugely male dominated, and even if they recruit now in a more balanced way,
the culture.
I came across chambers where there would be, 40 something people, 2 women, and they were both recent hires. And that would definitely it would put me off working there just at least a little bit, because you do need some solidarity in the workplace.
That's very interesting. There's one particular chambers that I'm looking at currently, especially because of where I live and the distance that I want to travel right now and the areas that I know for a fact I want to work in. And I just had a look, just literally 2 weeks ago, had a look at their website. And like you said, all the seniors are male, and you could see a few females start trickling. And also they're all British Caucasian. So it's something like, do you really want to apply there? But let's see what happens. I think the conversation is very alive, and people are very much open to having a diverse workplace. And I think, I love what they do there. But like you're saying,
I think it's worth saying that I never completely struck anywhere off on this basis, just because given the history of the bar, it's small. I don't have the ability to be picky because if I was picky, I probably would only get a handful of chambers I could apply to, and that would be, or you need to just apply to as many as possible. So it was something I considered, but for me, it couldn't have been the be all and end all. And I think you'll probably find the same. It is frustrating, but at least we can be part of the new crowds in these chambers, which is good.
So I think, I like to have a balanced approach to everything, to the point that it can be annoying. I also believe that, yes, the bar needs to be more diverse, but I think the lack of diversity happened organically just because of the culture. This is Britain. This is what Britain was at the time. It was for the upper class, that set of persons, and that set of persons looked a certain way. So now that the landscape has changed, it will take some time for the bar to change, if that makes sense.
No, of course. Yeah. And change is definitely making efforts. So I very much appreciate it when I can see that their more recent recruitment has been a bit more diverse. But bar courses themselves are changing too. I think the bar as a whole is changing. And certainly when I applied to the ICCA, one thing that they were really they very much made a stand about was making sure their recruitment process was completely blind. Right. So I had to remove all reference to my university, to my schools that I'd attended previously. Although quite frankly, I don't think anyone would have judged me on the basis of those. They were quite obscure. But everything went from my application. And so it felt like a much fairer process. And I don't know many chambers that do that. I don't know if they'd want to do that, but certainly I think we're starting to understand that there are new ways of recruitment, and the old system hasn't always worked.
Yeah, that's good. I have applied to a few mini pupillages that have done the blind kind of recruiting. I think it's a step in the right direction, but even I'll say this before we move on to the next point. Even there was some of the blind recruiting still does not address unconscious bias. So just a very simple example would be, there was a certain advocacy tutor. There were certain students, she would say, okay, you need to do 1, 2, 3 to move up to competent or to move up to outstanding. So her advice was very targeted at improving this person's skill, as opposed to other persons where she would just give you feedback on, well, this wasn't good and this wasn't good, rather than do this to move up. And I'm very observant, so I was able to see that. And I could see the persons that she was giving a certain advice to. And I wish I was a little bit more vocal. And if the situation should present itself again, obviously I think I'd handle it differently, but at that point I just observed, and it was more than once. So even the blind recruiting doesn't address,
No, it's definitely not perfect. It's not perfect. I mean, I'm trying to think of other ways that they can, and good application processes that I found in the past. I mean, I think part of the issue is also when it comes to things like pupillage, a huge part of it is personality, because people are recruiting a future colleague. They want to get on with somebody, so they need to like you. They need to think you're interesting, as well as having the academic side of things, and that's so much harder to prepare for because at the end of the day you can't really, can you? So I did find one Chambers where their initial application process, should I out them? I should. They were doing good. Cloisters. To be fair, they were all employment discrimination lawyers. Okay. I best get it right. But I mean, when I applied to Cloisters, they had a points-based application system. And I know a lot of Chambers do this, but I felt like theirs was extremely transparent. They had a very long document on their website stating exactly what they afforded points for. Wow. Kind of categories you needed to tick in your written application, and then at the further stages. And I just thought that was very meticulous as a process.
Right. Because you don't want to waste your time, do you?
No, and I mean, I knew that I probably wouldn't be a good fit for them because I don't have graduate qualifications beyond the bar course. I haven't got much, just picking something random from that form, trade union experience, which gave a fair amount of points. They were looking for a certain type of student, and having a quantifiable system like that can help you to point yourself in the right direction as an applicant, because you know what Chambers want, and that isn't always transparent on their websites. Yeah,
it's true. And I think it also helps maintain that person as a long-term tenant, as opposed to somebody who comes in and just absolutely hates it.
Absolutely, yeah. If you find somewhere that works for you, you're much more likely to stay there.